Everyone. I am so excited that fall is here. So happy October. I haven't seen you all since the last collective conversation. So wherever you are joining in from your car, from your work desk, from at home, thank you all for joining us for this month's collective conversation. If this is your first time joining us, welcome. We're so happy you're here. We host my organization, Philanthropy Together, which is a global initiative to strengthen the collective giving movement. We're on a mission to democratize and diversify philanthropy through the power of collective giving. And this is one of our new series that we host every single month right here on LinkedIn Live and Facebook Live. And we bring in some amazing leaders to talk about timely conversations. And so, again, if this is your first time here, welcome. And if you're coming back, welcome back. This month's conversation is something that is a personal interest to me, and one that I'm super excited about because we are in celebration of Hispanic Heritage Month, y'all. So shout out, yes, all of the things. Happy Hispanic Heritage Month. This month, y'all, a lot of people, we have to make sure that we are all on the same page and we're bringing awareness and advocacy and showing so much love around this month because every year from the time frame of September 15th through October 15th. So we're kind of in the closing piece of it. But the United States recognize and celebrate the vibrant histories and cultures and contributions of our Hispanic and Latinx brothers and sisters. And it also is the opportunity for us as individuals to learn and to tap in and to acknowledge the critical role of how philanthropy plays in strengthening communities and fostering positive change. If you don't know a lot about Hispanic Heritage Month, a good Google search would do you very well. But what I've realized is that this month actually is not just, it's a celebration of cultures of from those who have came from Spain and Mexico and Caribbean and Central and South America. Didn't know that. And this was actually in the Hispanic Heritage Month started in 1968 under President Lyndon B. Johnson and was expanded by President Ronald Reagan in 1988. And so there's that history there. And every year we're going to celebrate and keep the momentum going. And so I'm going to just hopefully that framing kind of helps you all and tee you up for our conversation today. Joining me is Stephen Almazan son, sorry, Stephen, Almazan, who is with the Los Angeles Latino Giving Circle, as well as Mariah O'Halloran, and who she is with the Peninsula Giving Circle, y'all. And both of these giving circles are doing amazing work. We're going to talk all about it and what they're each are doing within their professional work as well. Each of the circles are part of the largest network of Latino philanthropists in this nation. So shout out to the Latino Community Foundation for hosting both of these amazing circles and all the others that they have and what they're doing there to drive impact. So just welcome, Stephen. Welcome, Mariah. I am so grateful that you two are here. How y'all feeling today?
Fantastic. So excited to be here and meet your audience and meet you and Stephen. What an honor. Thank you.
Also feeling fantastic. Just really excited about the opportunity and ready to dive in.
Awesome, y'all. Well, again, thanks for being here. So I like to start off all of these collective conversations before we get into the nitty gritty and talk about all the things. Let's start with you all. People are interested. Both of you are respected leaders in your community. And folks want to know a little bit more about you, a little bit more, something that we just don't know and can't see on your LinkedIn and on your bio. So Mariah, let's start with you. Tell us where you're from, how you, just your journey into philanthropy, and just like a little bit background about you personally and professionally in your work.
Oh, thank you so much, Taisha. I was born in Venezuela. And so my name is originally Maria Eugenia Iguere. And I moved to the United States when I was about 4 years old. And so I grew up between both countries. And that really shaped my experience, not just as an immigrant, but also as an American, because originally we were not immigrants. My parents were diplomats. And so we represented Venezuela before the United States, and we were guests in this country. Our expectation was to go home. We went home and eventually we came back, and under President Reagan, got our green cards and eventually became citizens. That allowed me to live the life that I want to live. So there are over 60 million Latinos in the US. About 60% are Mexicans, so it's the loudest voice altogether. But we're not all Mexican. And I did not have the honor of being born Mexican, but I have the privilege of working within a community of Mexican and other Latino communities and feeling that love and that welcoming embrace. And so I'm excited to share with you guys about my trajectory, our giving circle, and what we do.
And Maria, thank you for sharing just even that, just your family history and where your people are from. I'm curious to know, like, who taught you who introduced you to philanthropy, if you don't mind me asking. Was
Yeah.
it, yeah.
I think I was introduced to philanthropy at home, and this may be a story that most of our Latino audience members are familiar with. I was the oldest daughter of three sisters and one brother. My brother's older than I am, but I had to take good care of my clothes because my clothes were being handed down to my sisters or my cousins or a relative. In fact, the dress that I wore to prom, and I finished high school in Venezuela, the dress that I wore to prom, I saw it 30 years later on my cousin's daughter.
Wow.
And that's part of our style of philanthropy. It's not as organized, perhaps, as it's become in the U.S., but culturally, we give to each other, we give to our families, and it's a common saying in every household in every culture: "Donde comen dos, comen tres." So where two people eat, three people eat, and that's the seed of philanthropy within our culture. Of we give from our heart, and sitting at the table with us is joining our circle of our family. And so that's that statement of where two people eat, three people eat, embraces people into our family. Not just, here, let me give you some money, but you're now part of my circle and I will take care of you. What do you think, Stephen?
Love that.
I can say it better myself. I was just so inspired by your work, Maria, and just thank you so much for all that you do. So my name is Stephen Almazan. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm the son of Mexican immigrant parents, born and raised in Boyle Heights, which is a working class neighborhood on the east side of Los Angeles. I'm a Giving Circle member of the Latino Community Foundation's LA Latino Giving Circle, which is part of the Latino Giving Circle network. I've been a member of the LA Latino Giving Circle since 2018, and I was introduced to this philanthropic community through a mutual friend from graduate school, who's now the vice president of policy at LCF. But I joined the LA Giving Circle because I personally benefited from the investment of Latino leaders and philanthropists who saw potential in me as a kid from Boyle Heights, and someone who was lucky enough to get accepted to a four-year university in Los Angeles, but didn't have the means to pay for it, but was introduced to amazing local philanthropists who were able to donate dollars to me through traditional means, through foundations, but also through personal means. And I credit much of my success to the investment that others that I don't even know, because they saw some type of potential in me. So this is my way of giving back. And just some little background in terms of the LA Giving Circle, which started back in 2017 with a few Giving Circle members, and now it's grown to well over 50 members strong, who bring their passion, their energy, their pride to everything that they do, from grant making to social happy hours to hosting community-focused events. And what I love about this philanthropic community is that we care deeply about Los Angeles, and we all come from a different backgrounds, but the same Latinidad. We are focused on addressing racial disparities and advancing equitable outcomes for Latinos across Los Angeles, and just really honored to be in this work with leaders like Maria and others across the state of California.
Stephen, thanks for sharing that. And I resonate with your story about pursuing your education so much. I'm a first generation master's graduate myself. And while the spirit and the passion to push me through being a teen mom and all that kind of stuff was there, it really was the village. It was the
Mhm.
people that was pouring. It was the philanthropists. It was my professors. It was people that I didn't even know that was pouring into me and encouraging me along the way. So I think that again speaks to, just the village and the different ways, and not just, in how communities of color organize our giving. It's not totally just treasure. It's all of those other pieces, like Maria was saying, was just, that is traditionally not counted for as being philanthropic, but for us it's a way of
Mhm.
living and how we are able to support one another. So I'm just glad you mentioned that. Well, before I go into like my first question for you all, I did want to ask, because the narratives is so important, right? Even the shared language of how the identities and how we are addressing these various different diverse populations that make up the Hispanic community. Some people say, well, Latinx and Hispanic, and what's the difference, and what is the what's the proper way, or how do we give honor and correctly name these groups, and what does that look like? So just keep asking a direct question with you all, just the culture differences, and what are the proper names and shared languages, and how we need to be saying and going about using those interchangeable terms of Latinx and Hispanic.
Maria, do you want me to go first, or would you like to go
Yes, go
first?
ahead.
Yes. Okay. So I'm going to provide the very technical answer first.
Mhm.
So for the difference between Hispanic and Latinx, or Latino, or Latine, or Latina. So these are pan-ethnic terms meant to describe, or I guess summarize, the population of people of that same ethnic background living in the U.S. Right. So like in the very traditional, very bureaucratic way from the U.S. Census Bureau, like this is the way of naming people from certain parts of this world, right, from certain ethnicities and backgrounds. So more specifically, Hispanics are from Spain, and from or Spanish-speaking countries in Latin America, which matches the federal definition, right?
Mm,
And Latinos are people from Latin America, regardless of language. And obviously, think of it as like a Venn diagram. Like some Latinos are Hispanic, and vice versa. But people have their own definition of what it means to be Latino. So generally, Latino is understood as like shorthand for for the Spanish word of Latino Americano, which is anyone born in or with ancestors from Latin America and
that's
living in the U.S. Right. So I am someone who's Mexican American from Los Angeles, and my experience looks very different from someone who's Mexican American living in Texas, or my wife who's Ecuadorian American and has family from Ecuador. She has very different experiences than someone who also grew up in Los Angeles. We have very different experiences. So it really is defined by how our lived-in experiences are. But I'll pause there and hand it over to Maria, who I know can definitely share more on this.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. So Hispanic was invented by the US Census Bureau to try to put their arms around who are all these people that are Spanish speaking. So it included Spain and Spanish speaking Latin American countries in individuals in the US, but it doesn't include Brazilians. They don't speak Spanish, Haitians, um, people from Suriname or Guyana, where they speak other languages. And so Latino, Latina, Latine, that encompasses Latin American. So if I were speaking to Stephen in Spanish, he would know by hearing my accent that this chick is either Venezuelan or Colombian, right? Just
right.
like we would recognize somebody from Australia or Texas just by their accent. And I would probably recognize that he's Mexican or Central American. So I'd have a sense of like the geography that he belongs to, as opposed to
Mm,
Uruguay or Paraguay or Argentina that have a very different flavor to their Spanish. But we all consider ourselves Latin Americans. Now, if we were talking to each other, I would say I'm Venezuelan. If I'm speaking to an American US audience, I identify as Latina. But if I'm speaking to my fellow Latinos, I identify as Venezuelan because that is where I'm technically from. And so the term Hispanic, when I was coming up through college, encompassed um, the it was considered like people born in the US who spoke Spanish at home. And Latino was used for people like me who were immigrants, who weren't US citizens, who had come. So these terms have evolved over time as well. And they continue to evolve. So people ask me, Why don't you use, especially my daughters who are millennials, why don't you use Latine or Latinx? It's more inclusive. I respect everyone else's choice, whether they want to be Latine or Latinx or Hispanic or Mexican or whatever term they want to use to self-identify. For me, as somebody born in Venezuela, I'm very close to that Latina, right? It's correct in my language of origin, and it's very closely aligned to my personal culture. But identity and these labels that help us understand each other, they're a very personal choice. So it's not wrong to call yourself Hispanic or Latina or Latine or Latinx. It's about you. Which one of these flavors feels right for you?
I so appreciate y'all providing that context. I think that the origin stories and being able to personalize and make it unique to to the person that you are speaking with and that you're
Mhm.
engaging with is what I hear from you all. That's what's most important. But sometimes we get so caught up in the like you said, Maria, like those terms, some of them are just rooted in the technical pieces of the senses and all of that, but the truth of it, the hard work of us relating and understanding why people are using those terms is very important. So thank you both for that. Well, Stephen, I recently read an article, and I want to talk about it because it was a good article. I read it like 3, 4 times because I'm like, yes, it reminded me so much of like Black Philanthropy Month with some of the things, the narrative that that you were talking about and touching on in the article. So if you haven't read it, y'all, and Ileana, I'll drop it here in the chat, but it's from the Chronicle of Philanthropy. And the title of the article was Latino charitable giving rates drop sharply, but that's not the full story. I love that. That's not the full story, right? And so in the article, Stephen, they talked a lot a bit about the decline, the overall decline, and that's just not just with the Latinx community. Like overall, y'all, charitable gifts are down. And even though there's still $499 of total contributions that's given out, it's it's declining as opposed to what it was in 2020. And so the article really centers on trying to understand why we're seeing a decline in those individual rates. And one of the things that it talked about was just what we kind of have already been talking about, of that Latinos are not, they're still giving, but in different ways. And what that looks like, that's not being counted, that goes beyond the dollar. And so when we talk about the contributions, the tributes, like how Latinos are showing up in their community and how they're making a difference and driving community impact, we have to talk about the things that's not monetary. And so, Stephen, I just want to provide the space for us to talk a little bit about that, and bring that out a little bit more.
Absolutely. So thank you so much for uplifting the letter to the editor that I submitted for the Chronicle of Philanthropy. So in my response, I referenced an article that, to your point, is about how Latino charitable giving rates dropped sharply, but that's not the full story, right? So according to a study that was published by Hispanics in Philanthropy that was referenced in this article, the average income for Latino households has stayed largely flat from 2000 to 2018. And as you can imagine, this would have an enormous impact on someone's ability to give back or donate. But even though that's the case, the rate of Hispanics giving to help others in informal ways, whether it is crowdsourcing for relatives' educational needs, or whether it's sending money to family members who are in need in a different country, right, are higher than those of others who may be more inclined to give back through traditional philanthropy. So part of the work that we do in the LA Latino Giving Circle is centered around demystifying what it means to be a philanthropist, right? We want to be clear that anyone can be considered a philanthropist, no matter their wealth. So just last month, for example, at the start of Hispanic Heritage Month, the LA Latino Giving Circle distributed around $90,000 to 3 local Latino-led nonprofits working on tenant rights, immigrant rights, and LGBTQI plus rights, which is our largest set of grants to date. And that right there is philanthropy for the people, by the people. And despite like a pandemic and economic upheaval, Our members have increased their and recruited additional people to join. We don't view this work as charity, but as a fight for the justice that our Latino and immigrant communities deserve. And for example, at the height of the pandemic in 2021, after witnessing street vendors across Los Angeles lose work due to the COVID-19 restrictions, the LA Latino Giving Circle decided to support street vendors. So when the most vulnerable Latino communities were hit hardest by the pandemic, we stepped up our giving and provided $10,000 to an organization that was helping directly street vendors so that they can support them for their economic needs. So over the past 7 years, I've been privileged to be part of this giving circle who have collectively donated nearly over $350,000 in grassroots dollars to orgs doing really dope work, doing incredible, moving mountains, doing so much for their communities. And we're part of this united movement inspired by the power of giving and civic engagement. But I'll pause there. I would love to hear from Maria as well on the work that she's leading.
I love that so much. And the locality of giving, of the giving circles, is what speaks to my heart, right? So I'm a Dartmouth College alumna. When I went to Dartmouth, I was the only Latina in my program. And I tear up every time I talk about this because guess what? I'm pretty fabulous. I am not so fabulous that I should be the only Latina in a program at a university that is older than our nation, right? But it's the reality. And until the 80s, Dartmouth didn't track ethnicity beyond Black or white. So Hispanics didn't even exist. Asians didn't even exist. We just weren't counted. We were so few and far between. It didn't even become co-ed until 1977. So this is one of the most storied institutions of our country, and it's on the opposite spectrum of California's progressive in terms of development, but it really showcases how much growth we still have to do. And we as a country continue to think of philanthropy in very Anglo-Saxon terms. We're not counting how much do people give through their churches? How much do people give informally through their families? Over 52 billion with a B dollars were sent to Mexico last year in remittances.
Wow.
That is Mexico alone. I send money home to Venezuela every month because my great grandmother needs it, right? Their economy is gone to the floor. And me sending them $100 makes a huge difference in their quality of life. It makes no difference in my quality of life, right?
Yep.
But that kind of informal giving isn't considered philanthropy, and yet that's exactly what it is.
Maria, you are so spot on. Like in that same article, it explicitly says that in terms of like when you consider informal giving, and then you combine that with the traditional charitable donations, Latino people seem to be giving actually more than their non-Latino counterparts. But that's why I like the title of that article, because it's like, that's not the full story, because institutional philanthropy, they're going to just, there's a decline in rates. And then it makes the narratives out there is like, well, we're not giving, people aren't showing up for community, but they are in the ways in what you were talking about, and especially through those informal giving ways. And I think that as we think about, all of us are disruptors. We're all trying to move the needle and get philanthropy to do better. I really think that that's where the opportunity lies, because Hispanic donors are underengaged. The number one reason why they are not contributing is because they simply have not been asked. And so what are y'all thoughts in terms of how philanthropy organizations are going about with the engagement of the Latino community? What should that look like? Because I think that we're thinking about solutions with better ways, and how y'all how these organizations can engage the donors. Because it's not that clearly the people have the generosity and the passion to give. It's just there's a disconnect there in terms of maybe it's the engagement piece. Maybe organizations are not considering how and better ways and how they can better engage with Latino donors that are in more alignment with their culture and the ways and how they give. What are y'all thoughts about that?
I have definite thoughts. So after graduating from Dartmouth, I joined the alumni engagement and development team for 5 years. I was the first person to lead their affiliated groups, which encompassed Black alumni and Dartmouth Lawyers Association, and grew that to include 6 other organizations before I left, which had not been recognized because the demographic of the organization had shifted so greatly. So if you think about it, for 200 years, the institution had been male and white. Yes, they accepted a black student in the 1800s, and then there was a small trickle and growing number of black students, but it was very small. And so they fundraise and they give in a very culturally appropriate for white male America. How do they come together? They go to a pub. So guess what? They would do these pub events, and the black and the white people and the Asians weren't really showing up in the numbers reflective of the community. Why? Because for Latinos, well, if I'm going to go do something, my wife's better feel welcome and my kids. It's not culturally appropriate to always have an event that's fundraising or engaging in a place where children and wives aren't welcome, where the la familia isn't part of it, because that's how, in general, as a stereotype, Latinos like to socialize. It's the same thing for African Americans. You're going to invite me to a pub and I'm going to be the one black person in the room. Well, that does not sound as great as staying home with my Netflix tonight. And so that engagement doesn't happen. And how we give is very tied to our identity. I 100% love Dartmouth and WashU that gave me this amazing education. That said, I have no desire to be in a pub around people who are drinking. It's just not, that's not who I am. The first event that I did in my role in LA sold out in 1 hour in 2001. This is before people could even register online. People were calling me on the phone and buying 10 and 20 tickets at a time because we were going to a lecture at the Simon White Wiesenthal Museum, led by a professor of ethnic studies. Guess what? Every Latino and Black person and Asian person in LA showed up that day. I sold out at the event and had to create a duplicate event for the next day. They had never seen those level of success
Wow.
of engagement in alumni. And that doesn't even touch like LGBTQ given at the university hadn't really developed fully because the experiences of these subsegments of the population had not been great, right? You loved the academic part, but like me, like being the only Latina was not that fun. Having to speak on behalf of all Latinidad, hello, I can barely speak for
Right.
myself some days. Why are you asking me what do Latinas think? What do Hispanics think? So like, I don't know. Let's pull all 60 million of them and find out, right? And so engaging people in a way that is culturally appropriate and continuing that engagement and that relationship. Asking me once is great, but if you don't ask me again, do you expect me to remember next year that you asked me on or about this time? No, it's that continuity and the building of the relationship where the giving happens in a formal way for all communities, right? If
Mhm.
you're white and your college only asks you once for money, next year you may or may not remember it. But if Feed the Dolphins calls you every month or every week or once a year and sends you the report and tells you this is the impact that your money served in around the world saving the dolphins and feeding them, now you have a reason to continue to give and invest.
Just to build on everything that Maria shared, in philanthropy, representation matters, right? So when philanthropic leaders reflect Latinx communities and share the same experiences as those who are most impacted by racial and gender disparities, that leads to more exposure of community-based efforts impacting our most marginalized communities, right? What I appreciate about the LA Latino Giving Circle and just the network broadly across California is that they're comprised of 19 giving circles across the state, right? So with new ones emerging each year, and it ranges all the way from Southern California to the Central Valley to Northern California, and it captures pockets that are often overseen or forgotten by traditional philanthropists or foundations. So we're representative of from baby boomers to millennials to CEOs to emerging professionals to immigrants to US born, Latinos, non-Latinos, right? We're inclusive of everyone who wants to contribute and provide and give back. And we're just harnessing the collective power of paying it forward with and through civic engagement. So just the Latino Giving Circles, just they offer a forum to partner with leaders and organizations offering community-driven solutions where we can learn about pressing issues impacting Latinos and engaging in local civic action, and just having philanthropists who reflect the Latino community helps drive dollars to organizations that are often overlooked, right, by traditional philanthropy. So one, philanthropy needs to start valuing the contributions of Latinx communities, and two, the local grassroots philanthropists in all the giving circles across California are changing the narrative of dollars going into communities of color. So it helps when you have the philanthropic community reflect the communities that need it the most, right?
Stephen, you spot on. And that's like such a good tee up for like our advocacy for the powerful model of giving circles and collective giving. It's because, like you said, representation does matter. We want to feel like we belong in spaces, and giving circles and collective giving groups are doing that right. To your point about all of the circles that are organizing in Cali, they're doing it right because they are creating a sense of first belonging. And then the second piece is that rootedness in shared values. And that goes to Maria's point of like how Latino donors tend to give that are based on those values, that are based on those interests, and the La Familia concept and the heartbeat behind that, right? And so giving circles really are serving as a model for more institutional philanthropy to kind of pay attention with the ways that and how we are engaging and creating that more spirited, relational based, community oriented, nothing about us for us kind of model where we can learn, feel safe about learning about the issues, and then amplify our impact in the collective, within the collective, than what we can do individually. And even in that report, and I'll move on, but it was just such a good, because they pulled out even specific donor behaviors within the Latino community, like high network donors, and how they prioritize more education, like Maria, right? Education and animal rights and healthcare. And then it talked about how the community is their top 4 priorities are religious, right? And congregations. And that makes sense, right? Because we know a lot of Latino communities are Catholics, or kind of rooted in their faith in that way. Food and shelter and basic necessities was a part of that. And then a third piece that they highlighted was just like how their immigration status mattered. So like how long immigrants lived in the U.S. was affected by how much they gave and such like that. And again, I think that speaks to the volumes of that religious congregation piece and how people are, sending money back, and then also finding community here within states, within these giving circles or whatnot. But was there anything else in terms of like understanding Latino donors that you feel in your heart that that institutional philanthropy or just the community at all just need to know? Because organizations are looking at ways and how to diversify their community impact and how to diversify their donor bases. So if there's anything else that y'all wanted to just share, would be a great time to do that was not lifted up in that report.
I would add that, like Stephen said, representation matters. So if the leadership and the officers of your philanthropic organization are not reflective of me or my culture and don't understand where I'm at, how to find me or how to engage me and can keep me engaged in that conversation, you're not going to be successful. But that's true about every customer experience, right? Whether you're talking about iPhone or Xfinity, if you're not happy with the engagement and the relationship that you're having, the value for your investment, you're going to find a different place to invest. And philanthropic giving is an investment. You're investing in your community. So for me, the Latino Community Foundation allows me to invest locally in my community. I live in Silicon Valley. There are billionaires blocks from my house, but all I have to do is go half a mile to the other side of US 101, And it's an entirely different community where there are insufficient resources, where the schools are not properly funded. And that's where I want my philanthropic dollars to go. Dartmouth has multi-billionaires giving them millions and millions and millions and billions of dollars. They won't miss my small donation. But my $2,000 a year at the Latino Community Foundation will make a huge difference
Right.
in a small nonprofit that's trying to launch a program to do daycare or to provide food or housing or experiences for farm workers, where my dollars have a true and huge impact in my community that matters. Now, there isn't a single time when a student advisor at Dartmouth has reached out to me and said, we need money for the food pantry or for books or for this student needs to get home, they have an emergency. There isn't a single time that I haven't figured out to give directly because that's part of my community, even though it isn't local. So they need to learn from all the places that are successfully gaining money from the Latino community and asking, what are they doing that we're not doing? Representation,
That's right.
the place of investment, and the level of impact. I don't need my name on a bench, but I do need to know that I helped to open a daycare for entry level workers in Half Moon Bay.
Mhm.
And that that's, you know, also a huge piece of just like the power of the collective. We know that it lies in the diversity of the people who are part of these various groups. So we often see that intersectionality comes up within giving circle groups. I know it shows up within my group, Heritage Giving Fund. I'm a woman, right? I'm a Black, and it's tied directly to my identity. Maria, we recently, just yesterday, I think, was Give to Women and Girls Day. And so that was like a huge day of advocacy to really bring some more awareness around the issues and how philanthropy, less than 2% of funds go to support causes that support women and girls. And so we'd like to just speak a little bit about the intersectionality of what you're saying, like even within your circle, because you are a woman and you are a Latina, and how how that shows up even in the collective, with you all, and how it's really allowing people to really further deeply engage in this kind of social good work at that intersection of, you know, the dualities of identities that are often exist within giving circles.
From a fundraising perspective, when you invest in women,
Mhm.
especially with micro grants and micro loans, the investment grows and impacts and stays in the community. When you invest in men, the same is not true. So no diss on men. I, as a woman and a Latina all day, every day, will always be happier to invest in women because I know that the money will stay within the community and help their family and the family next door. Donde comen dos, comen tres, right? We're going back to the same concept of we are a very generous community with each other. And so giving locally and having the opportunity to have these conversations with my fellow members at the Latino Community Foundation Peninsula Giving Circle and identifying what are our strategic priorities for this year, right? And for us, a big priority is women, especially and other people coming out of dangerous relationships, helping them to find safety and helping them to find these places that can allow them to have safe housing and a way to get back into the community and heal from these negative relationships. It's not all women, but it is predominantly women and children. And so we invest there. And then we invest in small nonprofits where since 2015, we've given over $220,000. Doesn't sound like a lot of people, but for 30 women coming together, impacting a small nonprofit, that's a lot of money. That's a lot of money. So the Latino Community Foundation last year, their total revenues were $19.6 million. Their grant making was $5.6 million. I love knowing that our little circle made this huge impact. It's just a bunch of ladies getting together who'd rather spend in their community than the equivalent of buying a nice purse once a year or two pairs of shoes right? I loved seeing it from that perspective. Do I need another purse or can I give a little bit more and know that we're opening this daycare and some other single mom is going to be able to have a safe place for their children to be so she can develop a career and become self-sustaining.
That's powerful because in the spaces in which you're giving circle with the
Mhm.
Peninsula Giving Circle, I I would imagine many of them are moms, right? I'm a mom of five, you're a mom too. And the fact that we can bring in that experience and advocate,
Mhm.
and even in that role as a mom or in that intersectionality and advocate for that
Mhm.
cause or for organizations that are serving it becomes so personal. And that's another whole piece of impact that's happening is that folks are finding their voices within these spaces in that kind of way, right? And then allowing and being able to educate others about the experiences maybe that there's non-moms that's in a circle or whatnot, but that intersectionality of us, of you all being Latina and women is there, and it creates other little environments for y'all to kind of learn about other, you know, experiences and causes that show up within the group.
And
And
that allows us to change the narrative about
yes,
Latinos and our impact in this country. We bring 3.2 trillion with a T
wow,
dollars to the US GDP. $3.2 trillion dollars. As an MBA, I had trouble putting my arms around that. Like, how much money is that? Here's what I finally figured out. It's the value of Apple as a company every single year. So
wow,
we are not here to take, we are here to give, and we are growing. And the majority of the US population, of Latino population in the US, has grown organically by births, and they're under 18. So it is a very large demographic group that if we are not paying attention to their needs, if we're not paying attention to this demographic group as customers, whether it's for philanthropic giving or developing products and services, we're going to be out of business.
right. And we know that about 70% of most giving circles are led by women. But Stephen, I think that's also why it's so important for more men to be in this movement, and want to give you the opportunity to talk about that intersectionality piece too. Because although I know that the Los Angeles Latino Giving Circle is mixed, like y'all welcome um, all genders or inclusive of all genders, but just it seems like y'all have a tight knit crew, just even with the men and how they're showing up and how y'all are engaging men into the movement, because we do need more men in this movement, and would like for you to just speak a little bit more about that piece.
Sure, absolutely. I think it doesn't go past me to I want to say last week, right, on October 5th, it was Latina Equal Pay Day, or sorry, and we had we're still living in an economy where Latinos are paid around 57 cents for every
Mhm.
dollar paid to white non-Hispanic men, right? So
Say
it
that
is not.
again, Stephen.
Mhm.
Oh, Latinas working full time year round are typically paid 57 cents for every dollar paid to white non Hispanic men, right? So that equates to around $2,500 every month in terms of the pay gap. That equates to around $30,000 every year in terms of the pay gap. And that equates over a 40-year span, around $1.2 million.
Mhm.
So there is a
Wow.
huge need to address that economic disparity, that economic disparity and the gender disparity, and that intersectionality of Latinas who are not being paid equitably, right? And I think there is a lot of work to be done to ensure that there are equal opportunities provided for all, right? But that means providing more of an equitable pay structure, right? And that means more dollars to Latino communities, specifically for Latina-led communities, right?
Mhm.
or Latino-led organizations. And for us in the LA Latino Giving Circle, I'm just really humbled and honored to be part of a circle that welcomes everyone, right? And I think it ranges from folks from their early to mid-20s all the way to folks who are retired and who just want to give back. So it is a very vibrant community. We're growing. I encourage you to join our circle, to join the Peninsula Giving Circle, join any circle that you can relate with. But honestly, it's about making sure that we're all stepping up and providing consensus-based solutions and consensus-based recommendations. So we're very intentional about making sure that all voices are heard. So when we're having meetings, when we're trying to organize happy hours, when we're trying to organize our grants night, which we just had last month, we want to make sure that the opportunities amongst the folks within the giving circle are provided, right? And we want to make sure, regardless of your background, we want to make sure that you feel welcomed, right? And that has a lot to do with making sure that folks who are men take a step back sometimes, right? And for men to like allow themselves to provide where we have this, I don't want to say egalitarian structure, but in a way, like in a way where we're all contributing to this effort to give back, right? So I really appreciate how the LA Giving Circle has been so inclusive and strives to be inclusive, regardless of background, gender, sexuality, and anything else.
And I know that I didn't ask you all this before, but I did tell you I probably will ask you a question that wasn't on our list. But we'll be remiss to not talk about, election season. It's coming up upon us, y'all. And I'm thinking so hard. I think a lot of people are trying to anyway, think very intentionally and thoughtfully about how they're going to move in this next election cycle. And was just wondering from an advocacy stance, policy, because both of y'all are so experienced in your professions with policy work, but just within your giving circles, how are you all leveraging, or if any, just having conversations around like how advocacy or what conversation y'all are having within your leaders or just within the collective about policy and what needs, how we all can kind of activate and get ready civically for what's to come. It's a big election that's coming up, and just wondering you all are having those conversations and what are you doing?
There are a lot of great Latino organizations doing civic outreach and education. I think it's really important to know that there's a very large and growing number of voters who identify as Latino or Hispanic. So I had to just look up the number because I don't recall numbers as well as I do words. So 7% of U.S. eligible voters in 2000 were Latino. That number in 2022 is over 14%, so double, right? And will continue to grow. And the growth is mostly organic from births in the U.S. People think it's like, oh, these people are all immigrants. Well, I'm an immigrant, but most Latinos in the U.S., like Stephen, were born here. They're like homegrown. And so helping Latino voters to understand that democracy works best when we all participate and vote, right? And that ensuring that they're registered to vote and that they're doing their due diligence to educate themselves is important. And then for both parties to make sure that they're getting valuable and good information out to voters. There's a lot of misinformation coming from abroad trying to hurt our country, particularly right now. We are in a very vulnerable state with no Speaker of the House. And there are forces outside the country that are cheering this on, right? And so we as Americans need to coalesce and figure out what is best for our country as a whole, not just for me as a Latina, but as for our country as a whole. And that is to make sure that everybody is getting out there and voting, and that we're voting and educating ourselves on these issues that matter most to us.
Well said. Stephen, you have any thoughts with what y'all do so much advocacy for like economic development and just like, I just love the work. I spotlighted you all and I just love what y'all are doing locally in California. I really do. And so just if any and all advocacy pieces, comments that you have to add.
Absolutely. So just briefly, as a country, we're stronger as a multiracial, multicultural, and multilingual democracy, right? And part of that democratizing philanthropy means giving your dollars to those organizations who focus on civic engagement, right? So back in 2017, one of the first grants that the LA Latino Giving Circle provided was to this organization called TODEC Legal Center, which is a Latino-led nonprofit in Riverside County, which exists to empower disenfranchised immigrant communities in Riverside, San Bernardino, as well as the Imperial counties to become, as you mentioned, economically, socially, educationally, and civically self-sufficient while enhancing the economic health and community health that they serve. And we were able to provide them about $20,000 when their annual budget was a lot smaller. And since then, our investment has helped their journey in securing additional funds from more foundations and donors. And it's just incredible how much more inclusive and how much more powerful our democracy becomes when we give to Latino-led organizations that are focused on civic engagement, that are focused on ensuring that our Latino families have access to these opportunities to make change within their community.
That's so important, especially when I think about like when we think about big movements that has happened and really created policy, like the civil rights movement, policy changes. I often think about the youth, because the movements that we have the expertise. They looking at us and they learn from us, and we're passing the batons. But they're like the energy that the youth are really going to move us forward. And I've been so inspired. Again, I'm a mom of 5. I have a 22-year-old, and I'm inspired by how they're showing up right now, in spite of the narratives where folks are like this generation and they're this and it's all this kind of negative. But I have a different thought in terms of our youth and how we're engaging them in philanthropy, especially giving circles. Are y'all, is any of your giving circles investing in youth in that way? And how are y'all bringing them into the work to kind of ensure that youth have a voice in all of these things that we're all working towards? We're trying to work towards a better world for them, right? So they're not still having the same conversation and dealing with the same issues that we're talking about today. But just would love to know about your youth engagement and just your thoughts overall about the Latinx youth and how they're activating at philanthropy.
This year, the Peninsula Giving Circle is choosing to prioritize women and people coming out of domestic violence relationships, and Latino organizations that support our farm worker chain, food to table organizations. And so this year, it's not so much about the youth, but about some of the prescient and urgent critical needs coming out of the pandemic years that need our attention right now. But you're absolutely right. So the civic engagement, the educating, the mobilizing, the registering to vote, the encouragement, that needs to happen within our families and within our communities. We're telling, and I tell people every time I get interviewed, I say, if you're eligible to vote, register to vote and do your homework. What are the top 3 topics that matter to you? And how do these leaders that want your vote, how do they align on these issues? Because that's how we'll bring about change and some collaboration. I don't care which party people vote for. I have my own preference. I've done my due diligence. But I do need for people to know, particularly because in the 2020 election and in the 2016 election, there was a lot of false narrative around the impact and the importance of our vote. And a lot of young people didn't show up to vote because they had been fed this narrative on social media that their vote didn't matter. So ensuring that everybody knows and believes your vote matters, in fact, and your vote matters in a way that will impact my life and generations to follow is really important. Right? We're asking them to miss time from work or school or whatever to engage in this democratic process. We need to make it worth their while. I have a great amount of hope for the next generation, for not just millennial. I'm a Gen Xer, so like millennials and Gen Z and Alpha, they are making real strides. I am seeing them make demands in the workplace that I didn't have the courage to ask for. I wanted it, I just didn't have the courage to ask for it. And I think we'll see that reflected come election time, that they will demand what they want for their quality of life, particularly in light of the very drastic changes that we've seen legislated from our highest court.
The only thing that I'd add on what Maria shared is that Latinx youth are not just the future of this movement, right? But they are civic engagement leaders today. It's important to continue engaging with nonprofits that support Latinx youth voices and their active participation in civic engagement. There's a whole host of amazing organizations across the state of California and across the country, right, who are engaging Latinx youth and all youth to participate more in civic engagement. For the LA Latino Giving Circle, back in 2018, we supported Inner City Struggle, which is a nonprofit based out of Boyle Heights in Los Angeles, which is focused on promoting Latino civic engagement in Los Angeles through community organizing, multi-generational leadership development, and just ways in which we can continue to build the youth movement of today, right? This goes back to the Chicano movement, right, of the 60s, right? And it goes back to the walkouts that so many brave young activists participated in East Los Angeles and across LA to fight for more representation in their classrooms, right? To fight for more resources for their schools. This is all, we're experiencing a lot of what we've experienced in the past in terms of these movements. And it's so important that we invest in the youth today because they are the ones who are leading to the change that we need as a society.
I wish that we had more time to talk a little bit more because y'all have just I have really been listening to you two today and have learned so much. And I personally want to thank you both for just bringing your full selves and simplifying some of the things that we need to talk about the rich cultural contributions and the philanthropic efforts within the Latinx community. We have 2 minutes left and my heart is thinking about, of course, like a call to action, but maybe not a call to action because folks are really, I think people, they're wanting, they're not just trying to just sit here on these Zooms and on these lives and just sit on the information. And so for those out there that are looking to invest and want to really contribute in a meaningful way to the Latinx community, is there any organizations that's on your radar that's really in full alignment with the priorities and the values of the Latinx community that they should consider supporting or just learning about? And then also, what's a good book for all of us to think or to consider reading as we learn more deeply about the rich contributions and the diversity of the Latinx community and their philanthropic generosity? So two-pronged approach, organizations and a good book.
So for organizations, I would say locally, there are a lot of small nonprofits doing fantastic work. Organizations like the Latino Community Foundation and the Giving Circles that allow you to invest in local nonprofits doing the work within your community and allow you to vote. Like, where should we put the money that we ourselves have just fundraised? Number two, and this is my call to action to everyone, if you qualify to vote, please register to vote. Your voice matters, and your voice matters in more ways than just how it impacts you. The number one issue for the 1 million Latinos who have turned 18 and qualified to vote is the economy. And I think that aligns with most of us. And so making sure that you and the people in your family and your community who are qualified to vote, register and get out to vote is really important. On a national level, I really appreciate the work being done by LULAC. But again, there are so many great organizations doing fantastic work for civic engagement and ensuring that our community is represented and gets access to a voice. How about you, Stephen?
the organizations that I would support are the organizations that the LA Latino Giving Circle recently supported last month on our grants night. So that includes Inquilinos Unidos, which is dedicated to empowering low-income tenants through community organizing, education, and advocacy for safe, decent, and affordable housing in Los Angeles. Another organization is Orale, which focuses on building and sustaining a thriving immigrant-led movement to end the criminalization of immigrants and just securing bold protections and approaches that allow immigrant communities and their families to thrive, which is based in LA as well. And then the last one is Somos Familia Valle, which is based out of the San Fernando Valley in California and fights for intersectional LGBTQI plus liberation through transformative dialogue, advocacy, and just civic engagement. And the books that I would recommend are Solidarity Economics by Manuel Pastor, which focuses on imagining and creating a new sort of economy, which is grounded in our focus on connection and community, as well as a book called Set the Night on Fire, which is LA in the 60s, which essentially focuses on a comprehensive movement history of LA in the 1960s, where social and cultural movements shifted away from the powerful elite and opened up opportunities for radical change that were led by youth leaders.
Excellent. I'm definitely going to check those out. Appreciate that. Recommendations of the organization and the books, y'all. Truly want to thank y'all for being lights out here, doing the work, driving impact, creating change within your giving circles. I hope that all of our participants, y'all will head on over to the Latino Community Foundation. They're doing amazing work with the scaling of their giving circles, y'all. Like, tap in. Consider joining them. If you're in the LA area, consider joining them and what they're doing and building over there. If you don't want to join a giving circle, donate to them. As you can kind of see, the money is flowing where it needs to go, through the lens and through the hands of these amazing philanthropists that are being good stewards of the resources of the group. And then if you are interested in starting a giving circle, y'all tap into Philanthropy together. You know, we host and provide training that for you to start a giving circle. We need more people in this movement, y'all. Election season, it's a lot of stuff going on. It's a lot of work that it is going to take more people to get involved. And it also is going to start with conversations just like the ones that we had today. Don't ever sleep on the power of just a good conversation that's really rooted in love, and we can really move the needle in that way as well. I just want to thank Stephen and Maria. Thank y'all so much for just being here again to share your light. Congratulations on what y'all are doing and your recent grants. And Sarah told me about y'all giving circle recently had a gathering or whatnot. So I love to see pictures of y'all still gathering and having fun and taking care of one another. That's what this life is about. That's what philanthropy is the love of humankind. And so, y'all, thank you so much for joining us today. We hope that you will join us for the next collective conversation. It's going to be next month. And actually, it's going to be rooted in civic engagement. We're going to have some political giving circles out here that's kind of tee us up and get us all ready for this election season, because it matters. It really matters, y'all. So, again, thank you again to our panelists and for all of you who took the time today to join us. We'll see you all next month.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you so much.